I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darryl Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darryl Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darryl Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darryl Lee makes Christmas better. Welcome to The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. As an author, adman and theologian, I've always been interested in people's stories. Not just those with a high profile, but people from all walks of life, regardless of fame. Which is why I created this show. Each guest who takes the Five of My Life challenge chooses a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. It's amazing what you can learn when discussing someone's 5 choices. I hope you enjoy listening to the show as much as I enjoy making it. Mick Colliss is best known for his hilarious and heartwarming book, Full Contact Sudoko. He's also a poet, radio host, singer, creative director, and much in demand public speaker. Charming as he is multi-talented, he is a true Aussie one-off. So Mick, welcome. I am so pleased to have you on Five of My Life, because I've been wanting to get you on for ages, and it took me a while to convince you to come on, because you were worried. Why were you worried, mate?
Hello, Nigel. Look, and it's great. It is good to be with you. I was worried because I've listened to a couple of them. I haven't listened to all of them, but I've listened to a couple. And the guests that you've had in the past have been highly intelligent, quite deep thinkers, and that's what I'm not. So I didn't want to sort of bring down the tone of your show too much. That's why I was a bit hesitant. So I was more protecting you than protecting myself.
Okay, now listen, because that's interesting, because some of the people that I approach have also said similar things to that, where they are worried that they're not going to be literary enough or whatever. And Five of My Life, it's got nothing to do with being highbrow. Some of the guests that you've had, though, are quite like high achievers or very well known. So so it's a bit intimidating to be in amongst that, thinking I have to try and live up to something that they've done. Okay. So as my daughter said to me this morning when I told her I was interviewing you, she said, "Oh, the rugby bloke who's not good enough."
Yeah, so there you go. And my wife said that. She said, when I said that you wanted me to do it, she said, "What are you going to say? You're not going to be interesting enough." So she sort of planted the seed quite early. Okay, well, let's put this to the test and crack into your first choice. Now, before I reveal your film, and we always start with the film on Five of My Life, you need to know that John Eales chose Blades of Glory. Did he?
Yeah, Grant Hackett chose Wedding Crashers, Rosie Waterland chose Grease 2, and Lane Beachley chose Austin Powers. Okay. So let's put to rest any worry about you've got to choose some.
I'm in good company.
Yeah. So don't worry about being lowbrow, which is good because you have chosen the 2008 Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly comedy Step Brothers. So, mate, Tell us on Five of My Life why you like that and your story behind it.
I'm quite simple, Nigel, and I just find that the comedy in that very simple. I like comedy films. That's what. If ever I sit down with my wife to watch a film, I go straight to comedies and she gets annoyed because that's all I want to watch. So I've always enjoyed hanging out with my mates, and that was my whole upbringing. We were never about girlfriends, and that's probably our excuse as to why we never got any, because we preferred each other's company. But I enjoyed hanging out with my mates, and then I was lucky. I had a mate called Marty Roebuck who moved down from Bathurst when he came down to Sydney to play rugby, and he moved in with my family, and I just had myself and my sister. My sister was overseas, so Marty moved in, and he became sort of this brother that I'd never had. That we lived together, and we just used to muck around the entire time. And there was one time we were wearing big baggy tracksuits and tracksuit tops, and we stuffed a whole lot of pillows up inside our tracksuits and put little plastic bike helmets on and Vegemite under our eyes, and we were pretending that we were part of the NFL. And we always wanted to get double bunks because we thought it'd be more fun to have bunks together. And then we used to train up at TG Milner at Eastwood, and we always thought about getting a motorbike with the sidecar, and we thought how fun would that be to drive around with the two of us in a motorbike and a sidecar. And then I moved across to Perth, and I continued just living with my mates and just enjoying their company. And then I stumbled upon this film, and it was two blokes who were, I think they're 40, and they're still doing exactly what I would love to be doing. and so there was something about it that just really, I mean, even they had the double bunks, which, you know, my mum and dad wouldn't let me actually do it, but they ended up doing it. And so yeah, it just really struck a chord about how much I enjoyed just hanging out with my mates. It was really that simple. I just find it very funny in a very simple film.
I'm glad you chose it because it gave me an excuse to rewatch it. But it features two of the best songs in movie history. So, I mean, Boats and Hose. I mean,
yeah. So that's the song at the end. I'm not even sure what the Italian. Do you know what the Italian name of that song is?
Do you know I do? It's Conti Partiro.
Yeah,
and it's translated completely wrong because it says time to say goodbye. What it actually means is I'll leave with you. But forget that. It's a brilliant song. It's a fantastic song.
It's a brilliant song. And it's one of those songs that, like the end of that scene where he's doing that, yeah, and he's throwing in, John Ciarolli's throwing in Boats and Hose during this beautiful song. And it's a song that a lot of people play at funerals. And I've been at a couple of funerals where, as the coffin's, you know, sinking down at the end of the ceremony, and they start that song up, and I'll look across to some mates of mine that have seen that film, and you can't help smile. And I know it's completely inappropriate, but every time I hear that song now, whether it's at a funeral or wherever it is, I just think back to that film, and with John Ciarolli on the drums, just chipping in Boats and Hose. So it's very simple humour, but it's great.
It was written, directed, produced, and acted by the same team, all exactly the same people who did Talladega Nights 2 years earlier. Yep. So for them to get it made was unbelievably easy because it's the same crew. You are making a film as we speak. How have you found that process, and how are we going with it?
It's been a lot of fun. And, you know, I've always thought guys like, Will Ferrell and Adam Sandler and guys like that just make fun movies with their mates. I just think there couldn't be a better way to earn a living. And Adam Sandler in particular, when he does those grown-up films, he's done two of them, it's just five of his mates, and they just muck around, and I don't know how long it takes them to shoot, but they muck around. So I have been doing a film with a mate of mine. He'd written a film, and I didn't know how to write a movie, but I had the idea. So we've been working together for 4 years. We just actually got off a Zoom meeting with the producers this morning. So there's about 2 bits of dialogue that we need to refine, and then that script will be going off to Madman before Christmas for them to sort of give it the final sign-off, and then they'll send it out to directors, and they'd ideally like to be starting to shoot next year. So again, that's just been a really fun process, and the film is, again, it's about my mates. So, you know, my dream is to walk down the red carpet and see a movie about me and my mates. That'd be the icing on the cake.
And is it true that Eric Bana's going to play you, or have I just made that?
So he's been thrown around. We haven't told Eric that yet, but he's on the wish list of actors. And there's two brothers in the film, and they want the Hemsworth brothers to play them, and they said they don't want the dud third Hemsworth, they want the two good Hemsworths, otherwise they're not interested. So even that whole side of things, just, you know, pretending who's going to play each other, has just been a lot of fun. And I said to the producers that if there's a scene where I need a lot of extras to come along, can I provide the extras? And they've said, yeah, definitely. So I'd just love to get all my friends. There's a scene in a pub over here in Perth. I'd just love to have all my friends in this scene, in this pub, and then when the movie finally gets made and we have the red carpet premiere, I know everyone will be sitting looking at that film, and they'll spend the whole time waiting until they see themselves on camera, and that'll be the most important and exciting thing for them. Then I think we'll have to start the movie again so everyone can actually just watch the movie without getting over the excitement of seeing themselves. So it's a bit of a pipe dream, but look, it's heading in the right direction. It's been 4 years in the making, but we're as close as we've ever been, so fingers crossed it'll get done.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I can't wait to see it, mate. And listen, let me know if you're filming any scenes in Sydney, because I'd love to be in the background in a pub. So we're moving on to your second choice on Five of My Life. And before you tell us what book you have chosen. To talk to me a little bit about your initial response to this was you're saying, well, I'm not a big book reader. You found this one a bit challenging.
I don't read books, which is people think is strange because my job, I'm a writer. That's kind of what I do. And I remember I was at an advertising agency, and my creative director, he couldn't believe that the only thing I read was Inside Sport magazine. I didn't read books. So I read a couple of books at school because I had to, and then I've read a couple of sports autobiographies or biographies, whatever it is, where the people either write it themselves or someone writes about them. So I'm certainly not a reader. So when you did say, what's your favourite book, I really had to dig back and think, well, what's the most recent one I've read? And it was one by Peter Fitzsimons called Batavia. And I've got to know Fitzy over the years, so I kind of lean towards his stuff because I can generally understand what he writes about. And he writes in English and he tells good stories. And that one for me was living in Western Australia about this shipwreck that happened on the west coast of Australia back in 1629. I just found the historical story about that ship was extraordinary, and I don't think enough Australians actually know about that particular episode in Australia's very long and storied history that goes back 60,000 years. But this one in 1629, where this shipwreck and the brutality and the barbaric events that went on with this shipwreck, with people being murdered and raped and having hands cut off. It's an extraordinary chapter in Australia's history that not enough people know about. And I think being in Perth and, having come from Sydney but living here now, and then to find out this little bit of history that's, 10 hours up the coast, I was just absolutely blown away by that story that I just didn't know until then.
Well, you and me both, mate. And I mean, obviously, I read the books that my guests choose, and it really upset me. I mean, Fitzy is a friend of this podcast. He's been on and shared his 5, which was great. But I read that book. It really, really upset me, the notion of that horrible... he wasn't the captain, but one of the senior officers deciding that he had to murder 100 innocent women and children so that the 40 of his mates would have enough food. And it made me want to ask you about your view of evil and morality, and are you a religious man?
Look, I was brought up as a Catholic, and I'd still say I'm a Catholic. I don't practice very often, but I try to be a good bloke. I guess that's my religion. I try to do the right thing by people, and I'm not a God botherer by any stretch of the imagination, but I sort of got a bit of a moral compass that I try to stick to. And I think I was disturbed, like you, at the behaviour of the way some of those men treated other, not just the women and children, but the way they treated other human beings. Just, I couldn't believe that it was real. It was almost something that you'd see in a movie and you think, oh, this couldn't be true. But all this stuff had actually happened, and just no concern about human life other than their own. It was just all about self-interest, and the extent that they went to for their own self-interest. Even when they'd send them across to that other island because they thought there's no water over there, so they'll all just go over there and die. And just how this bloke could be so callous and just not care about anyone was extraordinary. And even it was so barbaric. If they charged someone first, before they hung them, they'd cut their hands off and then they'd hang them. Like, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
I mean, I wasn't very proud of myself. I was a little bit ashamed, but I was pleased when they cut his hands off and hung him at the end.
I know. That's how bad the bloke was. Yeah. That's how bad he was. It was just, it was unbelievable. It was just, back in 1629, so, we're a long time away, and that's the most inhospitable terrain up there, where there is no trees, there's no shade. It is just hot. And it'd be a horrible place to be shipwrecked. And I think it took him 6 months to go back to wherever he was to then come back again. And just for those poor people, just not knowing how long that they were going to be there for, and the fear that they would have had, and just knowing what they'd seen. Like, one of the blokes had his wife and kids murdered in front of him, and just mentally trying to survive in that situation. Just I can't fathom how they actually did survive over there.
Well, listen, on a happier note, you mentioned that you are a writer, and you are a wonderful writer. I urge all my listeners to check out Mick's work. You've written 5 books. 3 of them are poems. So, mate, you hide your light under a bushel. Tell us about your poetry. I mean, there's a theme. What rhymes with George? What rhymes with Jakovich? What rhymes with Millsy? But tell us a little bit about your poetry.
Yeah, so it started off. I remember I wrote my first poem. I remember I was in would have been year 9 or 10 at school, and we had a class. We were given a picture, and we had to write a story about the picture. And I thought, I can't be bothered doing that, so I'll just write a poem. So for some reason I wrote a poem about this picture, and it went okay. And then I went home, a couple of months later, and I wrote a poem about my under 15 rugby coach at the time. Again, I don't know why I did, but I just thought that I did and I would, and it worked out all right. So I started doing some stuff, and then I'm not going to say I got a reputation for being able to write poetry, but I got asked by the West Coast Eagles to write a poem about a guy called Glenn Jakovich to celebrate his 250th game. So I wrote 2 poems about him, and then I read them on the day of his 250th game to some of the rooms, the corporate hospitality rooms out of the game. And by this stage I had maybe 30 poems that I'd done, and I thought, and I remember when the Eagles asked me to write about Jakovich, the first thing that came to my head was what rhymes with Jakovich. That was going to be my biggest problem, trying to rhyme his words. So when I ended up having about 30 poems, I thought, instead of me just having them sitting in a drawer, I might, just try and stick a book together. So I called that one What Rhymes with Jakovich, and then I started doing a segment on 6PR, which is a radio station, a sister station, I think it's to TUE, 3AW, 4BC, and 5AA. And I'd go in there at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday during the breakfast show. They would give me a topic. Listeners would ring in with words about that topic. And then I had an hour to go away and then write a poem, including those words on that topic, and come back and read that after the 8 o'clock news. So it became the most stressful part of my week.
I was going to say, wow, slam poetry live.
Yeah. So some of them actually worked out pretty well. I'd read them back and I thought, wow, how do I do that? And others I was a bit embarrassed about, but I thought I only had an hour. So if it was no good, I had a great get out of jail card that people listening will think, it's okay, he only had an hour. And if it was mildly good, people thought, wow, he only had an hour. So it was a kind of a win-win situation for me. And one of the guys, Steve Mills, was one of the breakfast hosts, and he always used to joke at the end, that poem's from the book What Rhymes with Millsy, and that was just an in-gag that we had. But after a couple of months, we started having listeners ringing up saying, where can I buy the book What Rhymes with Millsy? And we had to say, well, look, it actually isn't a book, we're just mucking around. So I thought, look, why don't we do one and call it What Rhymes with Millsy? So I did that, and then over the next 10 years I'd written more, and there was a guy called George Grillazich who was a broadcaster on 6PR, and when he saw What Rhymes with Jakovich, he just said Grillazich. So I thought, okay, fair enough. So I thought for my third book I was going to call it What Rhymes with Grillazich, but I thought Grillazich is too hard to Google, so I just called it What Rhymes with George, which was a lot easier to spell, and that was, my third collection of poetry was called What Rhymes with George, but all been a bit of fun, just a lot of sports stuff that I've done, and a few, so I've been asked to write a couple of poems for various corporations, so I've stuck a couple of them in, or if there's been any sort of global incident that has touched me in some way and it's made me put pen to paper, I've included that in the collection as well. But Nigel, as you said, it hasn't been a money-making gesture, and trying to make money out of poetry is like throwing a rose petal into the Grand Canyon and hoping to hear an echo. So it's been purely a labour of love.
Well, listen, mate, why don't you recite one, if you don't mind me asking, why don't you recite one? How about the cracking out the ultimate test? Yeah,
the ultimate test, and the story behind that is it's about a young guy who wanted to play for Australia and always hoped it would be on a sports field, but it ended up being on the battlefield. And the poem just comes in the form of a letter written by this young soldier to his father from the trenches just about to go into battle. So it just starts off, Dear Dad, remember the day that you took me to town and we went to the SCG? You bought me a flag and we stood on the hill and I sat on your shoulders to see. And remember my words when the game reached its end, how I said what I wanted to do? I said, that was great, Dad, and when I grow up, I'll play for Australia too. Well, here I am, Dad. I've stayed true to my word, but it's not how I hoped it would be. The crowds have all gone and the ground is a mess, and there's nobody cheering for me. I'm hungry and cold, but I'm starting to sweat. Mere words can't describe how I feel. I'm not in a jersey, I'm not wearing shorts, and my first cap is made out of steel. My gut's in a knot and I almost feel sick. I've gone 2 whole days without sleep. My feet are quite damp, for we've walked most of the night through mud that was 6 inches deep. I'm nervous as hell and I can't settle down. I keep wondering how well I'll do. But I guess that's just normal and how it should be on the eve of my national debut. The waiting's the worst thing, we just sit around. What happens is out of our hands. We all feel like pawns in a big game of chess. swapping lives for a small stretch of land. So many have fallen, it seems such a waste. To say it's a lark is a lie. I'll do what I'm told and I'll keep my head down, and I'll pray that the Lord's on my side. Well, Dad, I must go, for we're ready to start. It seems we've been given the word. The silence is eerie, the boys are all quiet. Our heartbeat's the only sound heard. We'll stick with each other, we'll fight till we drop. We'll each give far more than our best. Tell Mum I am happy, I ask for no more, for this is the ultimate test. Your son.
Oh, mate. I mean, I know that poem, but it still moves me. Gosh.
Yeah, it's one of those. And again, I read that back and I think, wow, that's pretty good. Did I actually write that? So it's one of those weird things that sometimes they work out all right, and that's one I'm particularly proud of, because I've got an enormous amount of respect for our servicemen and women, and you know I couldn't imagine doing what they went through. So it's just my little personal tribute to them and what they went through for us.
Well, listen, thank you for reading it, and I thoroughly recommend your poetry to everyone listening. We're going to change pace. We're going to go to the 80s, and for the first time ever on 5 of My Life, we're going to add Rod Stewart to the 5 of My Life Spotify list. We're going to 1981 to the hilariously titled album Tonight I'm Yours. You've got to love Rod, and his single Young Turks, which is ironic because that phrase never appears in the song. Tell us why you have chosen that song on 5 of My Life, Mick.
Well, can I just say, if I could ever come back as someone, I'd come back as Rod Stewart, because I think people talk about living the dream. He was a rock star, and who doesn't want to be a rock star? He played soccer. He wasn't ideal, but he just ended up buying his own soccer club, so he always was guaranteed a game. And he was married to a supermodel. So for me, he ticks every single box. And I remember that song, and I've probably never listened to the words. You've probably listened to it more closely than I have, but I always remember when I was at first year university and I was doing a Bachelor of Arts in Communications. And so you had the way that uni works, and I don't know why they do this, but you've got to make up a certain number of units to get points to make your units count, whatever it might be. And I was doing this unit on electronics, and I did not know what I was doing. I don't know why I ended up picking it, but I did. And I remember sitting in my room one night trying to do an assignment that I couldn't understand. It was all about diodes and electrodes and things that were just so far beyond me, it's not funny. And that song came on the radio, and there was a line, and I wasn't getting depressed, but for a young bloke, I was probably only 18, and this was, a really stressful time for me not being able to do this assignment. And that song came on the radio, and there's a line in it where it says, "Young hearts, stay free tonight, time is on your side." And I just, when I heard that, for some reason, it just made me relax. Like it was almost like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders, that I was getting so caught up about this one unit of a one semester course that I was doing, and I didn't need to worry about it because time was on my side. And every time I hear that song, I don't know why, but it's one of those things that just sticks in my head, and it calms me down, because it makes me think that, don't worry about all this stuff, because I'm running out of time now, but at the particular time I had a lot of time ahead of me, and it was, as I said, I've probably never listened to the song in its entirety and understood. I still don't know what the song means, but there's just that particular line in there affected me and was highly beneficial at that particular time for me, and I'll never forget it. That's
wonderful to hear you say that. 'Cause I'm glad you heard that line, because the lyrics are totally contradictory. So that line, that line is brilliant, and you're right. He said that, and that's a useful sentiment to help you put things in perspective. But about 3 lines later, he goes, "Because life is so brief and time is a thief when you're undecided." So completely the opposite point, which is hurry up, mate. Yeah, you're running out of time.
Lucky I stopped listening.
So can I ask you, mate, are you decisive, do you think?
Am I decisive? No.
Okay.
No, I don't think I am.
You can't decide whether you're decisive. That's the answer.
I have to say, no, probably not. Some things I'd like to think I'm decisive about, but other things I'm not decisive about. So I'm probably undecisive more than decisive.
I have to ask, because the film overall is about a couple called Billy and Patty, and they ran away from their hometown and their respective parents to live their life to the fullest.
Did Patty give birth to a 9-pound baby boy or something?
10-pound baby boy, that's the way.
10-pound baby boy, there you go.
It makes me want to ask you, mate, how did you meet Sharon? Sharon being your wife.
My dear supportive wife. So I was, among being a failed rugby player, as your daughter has so kindly pointed out, I was a failed surf lifesaving Ironman. And I was very keen to try and become one. I didn't start doing that till I was about 25 years old, and I'd moved across to Perth. So I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, so I was a member of a surf club over there. But when I moved to Perth, I found I could actually ride my push bike to the beach. So I really embraced my desire to be an Ironman when I got to Perth. And I was training at the local pool, Claremont Swimming Pool. And my wife, who I didn't know at the time, was a very good water polo player, and she was down there training for water polo. And I remember seeing her sitting on the block, and she had a back to me, and she had quite a masculine physique, I would call it, Nigel.
Careful, mate.
She had a narrow waist and quite broad shoulders, and was quite muscular in a nice way. And I thought, she looks pretty nice. And I'd done journalism. I ended up doing journalism over here because I left my course at Macquarie and went and did phys ed, but got over here, did journalism. And then I remember I got home, it must have only been about a week after seeing her at the pool, and I'd see her a couple of times a week when we were both training down there. And there was a thing on the news, and all these girls put their heads up and said their name. And because Australia just won the Women's World Cup, and there were 7 Western Australians in the Women's Australian team that won the World Cup. And as I'm just watching the news, this girl's put her head up and I said, that's the girl that I like from down at the swimming pool. So because I'd done journalism, I thought what I could do is write an article about the 7 women in the Australian team from WA and see if I could get that in the papers. And I thought that way I could actually get to interview her legitimately as part of this story. And I rang up a guy called Russ McKinnon, who was the media manager for rugby that I'd been dealing with. And I said, I want to do a story on these water polo women. He said, well, the one you need to talk to is a girl called Sharon Wheelock. And coincidentally, that was the one that I actually liked from down to the pool. So she was working for Water Polo WA at the time. So I went and sat with her for about an hour and a half and found out everything that I needed to know about her and sent her a bunch of flowers to thank her, as I always do whenever I do an interview with anyone. And we ended up eventually going out and getting married. And here we are 21 years later and still together.
So that's... What happened to journalistic integrity?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we're going to stick with the water theme for your 4th choice on 5 My Life. You've chosen City Beach in Perth. Before you tell us the story behind that, could you tell us where it is and describe it?
Yeah, so City of Perth, it's Perth's main, I guess it's the closest beach directly west from the city, so they call it City Beach. So it's probably about 10 k's directly west from the city of Perth. And it's funny, being brought up at Eastwood, we're probably 30 or 40 k's from the beach at Eastwood. But my old man used to always take us to DY Beach when I was a kid. Every Saturday we'd load up the car, we'd head out to DY. He'd push us onto waves on surf mats, and we'd call in at McDonald's at North Ryde on the way home. And it was just a really nice memory that I've got. And when I obviously had my license, I joined a surf club, joined Bilgola, but wasn't able to get to the beach a lot because I was living at Eastwood. And as I said, when I got to Perth, I was able to get to the beach a lot more. And I've always found just being at the beach very calming. I like the look of the water on a beautiful day with the blue sky and the blue water and the white sand. It's a very nice place to be. And I joined the City of Perth Surf Club when I first got to Perth, and then ended up joining another club, and then stopped when we had our kids. Once my youngest son turned 13, he joined the Nippers down there, so the whole family joined the club. And the coastline in Perth, if people have been to it, it's not as pretty. Like the northern beaches in New South Wales are beautiful because of those headlands and individual beach and those beautiful headlands, and it's stunning. Perth has just got this almost one long stretch of coastline, and the sand is incredibly white. The water is some of the clearest water that you'll see anywhere in the world, and you can go down to the beach in the middle of summer and you can jump in and head north and swim maybe 200 metres north, and then when you come out, you're the only person on the beach. So I find it such an amazing place in that you're in the middle of a city, but you can be at the city's closest beach and be 500 metres up the road and be like you're, 10 hours out of the city, because it's so isolated and deserted and quiet. And that, I don't know, that just that quietness and that being on your own, there's just something about it. And it's become a tradition now. Every family Christmas, we go to City Beach for a swim in the morning, and I've spent a lot of time there. And it's a place that if ever I'm away, I always like to come back to it. And if ever I have people from the East Coast come across, it's a place I'm very proud of as a Western Australian, and I love to take people down to City Beach as a West Australian now, as I call myself, and show them this beautiful part of the city that I now live in. So it's a real source of comfort for me, and it's a real source of pride, because Nigel, when I first met you and you came across to Perth, the first place we took you, and it was a miserable howling sea breeze was in it, and it was quite ugly, but we took you down to City Beach, and the next time we went down, it was beautiful and offshore. So it's there's so many moods of the ocean, and that's it. It's just something, a place it feels like home to me. And for someone that grew up on the other side of the country, that's a place that I feel at home. So it's a real special place for me.
It's wonderful hearing you light up when you talk about it. And I think in this modern society that we live in, there is a real issue with people not being attached to their immediate geography, because you can be attached on the internet to people in Russia, Brazil, Madrid, whatever, and not know your next door neighbour. And I think there's a real power and profundity in being able to genuinely love the ground that you're on. I mean, the place where you can walk to. And it's like the TV show Cheers, where it's a place you go where everybody knows your name. Like there's always going to be someone that you've seen or you're familiar with it, and it's like you can turn left or right and be completely on your own, but if you want a bit of company, you're going to bump into someone if you want to have a chat to someone. So for me it's a great mix of what it offers. Oh, wonderful. Listen, we're coming to my favourite of the five on Five of My Life, which is people's possession. And it's because people, usually don't choose a Ferrari or something moronic. They choose something of little monetary value, but something that has enormous emotional value. And you've chosen Marty Roebuck's Test jersey against Scotland. Now, for people who don't know, I mean, Marty was a bloke, I think, that you had your stepbrother's young man living with experience. But explain who Marty Roebuck is, and tell us about the jersey and the story behind it.
Look, so I grew up wanting to play for Australia. That was what I did, and for me,
at rugby union, this is
at rugby union. Yeah, that was what I wanted to do. So I started off in league first, and I switched to rugby union, and that was what I wanted to do. So I had a little bit of success as a junior. I played sort of at Eastwood. I won the Colt of the Year at Eastwood for being the most outstanding Colt, and the runner-up that year was a guy called Richard Harry, and Richard went on to play 37 test matches for Australia, and I was never heard of from again. So I kind of thought that I was on the right path to becoming a Wallaby. And then Marty was from Bathurst, and I have a lot of relatives up in Bathurst, and Marty was actually going out with my cousin Trish at the time. And I was in year 11, Marty was in year 12, as was my cousin. My cousin Trish was staying down with my family because she was the same age as my sister and got on well with my sister. And she'd done a HSC, and Marty drove down with her HSC results and delivered them to her at my house. And that was the first time I'd met Marty. And Marty had played New South Wales schoolboys in the seconds with a good mate of mine, and I just hit it off with him. We just got on extremely well, had a similar sense of humour. He stayed down to play Colts for Eastwood, and then he was just, as I said, my sister went overseas and there was a spare room at my house, so Marty ended up moving in with me, and we both wanted to represent Australia as Wallabies. So we both trained hard. This was back in the day where you trained Tuesday, Thursday night and you played Saturday. But we trained every single day. We were doing cross training before it was fashionable. We'd ride bikes up hills till we couldn't ride anymore. We'd run, we'd take ourselves down the park and do all sorts of drills and things, and ended up playing first grade at Eastwood. I was playing fourth grade at Eastwood. He kept developing, went on to play for New South Wales. I was still playing fourth grade, and then he went on to play for the Wallabies. And I remember before he did that, there was a guy called Adrian McDonald who'd played at Randwick, then came across to Eastwood, and he made the Wallabies in 1983. And we went up to where Pugs, as his name, was living, and in just a washing basket was his Wallaby jersey. And I remembered me and Marty picking up this Wallaby jersey and both holding it and looking at it, just thinking that it was like we'd found the holy grail. We were both so overawed by this simple piece of gold cloth, and that was what we both wanted so much. And Marty ended up going on and doing it. He made his first Wallaby team in 1989, then he went on to play in the World Cup in 1991, and he gave me this Wallaby jersey that he actually wore in a test match. So this jersey that he gave me it had been in the Wallaby dressing room, it had run out onto the ground, it had stood there and listened to the anthem, the whistle had gone, and this jersey was out there for 80 minutes in the cauldron of a test match, and he gave me that jersey that had done exactly what I wanted to do. So I ended up framing that jersey, and I've got it stuck up on the wall in one of my kids' bedrooms here, and it represents to me everything that I wanted to achieve in my life was in that jersey. A lot of people wouldn't get as excited as I do about it, but for me, it is my favourite possession by a long way.
And didn't you end up representing your country anyway?
Yes, I did, Nigel. So that dream of mine never died. Like, I never let it go. And I don't know why I was so obsessed with wanting to play for Australia, but I was, because I just always thought that people that played for Australia were better. I put them on I'm the classic person who just put them on a pedestal, because I remember, I was in the car with Marty one time and we went to the service station just to fill up petrol. And the guys at the other Bowser filling up his petrol, and he's come across and shook Marty's hand and said, "Oh, Marty, great game on the weekend. That was, really well done." And Marty's just said, "Thanks very much." So I just found it was, probably part wanting to have my ego stroked because it had never been stroked. And I just thought it'd be such a cool thing to have people just off the street come up and pat you on the back for something that you'd done. And the thing that you'd done was play for Australia. So you were getting so much out of it for yourself intrinsically because you were playing for Australia, but extrinsically you had people coming on the back and patting on the back for what you'd done. So, when I couldn't do rugby anymore, I tried surf lifesaving. I wanted to represent Australia in surf lifesaving like Grant Kenny did. I tried swimming because I thought maybe I could be a swimmer. By the time I tried lawn bowls, I thought maybe that was my ticket. I could make the lawn bowls team because my grandfather was a good lawn bowler, so I thought maybe that's where the genes are going to kick in. But then I found out the Australian lawn bowls team, most of the kids in that were 19 or 20, and by this stage I was 40, and I thought, oh God, I've missed the boat on lawn bowls as well. And I ended up going to Brisbane to watch the Wallabies because I thought if you can't play for Australia, watch Australia play. That was my next thing to do. So I went up and watched them, and on the way up a mate of mine pulled out a book of Sudoku puzzles, and to cut a very long story short, I discovered there was no Australian Sudoku team, did a bit of sniffing around, and ended up picking myself and three mates in the first ever Australian Sudoku team, and we went across to India, the four of us. None of us had played Sudoku before, but it was a chance to wear the green and gold, so we decked ourselves out in 5 different uniforms, had the blazer and the tie, and the blazer was modelled on the 1948 Olympic blazer, because I hate all the new Olympic blazers that are blue or white or off green, whatever the hell they are. So we went really traditional with the gear and went across, and I had my own green and gold Australian playing kit for when we were actually competing over there. And I actually went across and got to play for Australia, and it's one of the proudest moments of my life was sitting in the great hall at the Holiday Inn in Goa, and I had my puzzle booklet face down on the desk in front of me, and the boss of the World Puzzle Federation has come out the front and he said, "You may start." And I remember when I turned my puzzle over and I picked up my pencil, I thought that this is it. I'm actually playing for Australia. The whistle had blown, the siren had sounded. That was my moment. That was my Wallaby running on to Cardiff Arms Park or the SCG, wherever it might have been. And I actually had the time to sit there and think to myself, I'm playing for Australia. And it was. I still get goosebumps when I think about it now. It was such a beautiful moment. And I am very lucky. And as delusional as I am, Nigel, I can walk into a room with Marty Roebuck or John Eales or Steve Waugh, and I stand just as tall and just as proud as them because we've all played for Australia.
And you came 89th out of 89, I guess.
I did come 89th out of 89th, but that's 89th in the world, Nigel, and there aren't many people with a world ranking of 89th, so I'll take that any day.
And you've written a just fantastic book called Full Contact Sudoko about that story, and that's the story that's being made into a film.
Yeah, and again, I didn't know. I tend to jump into things that I don't really know what I'm doing, and I remember just coming home on the bus from Goa, and I just thought it'd be nice to just have a bit of a record about what I'd done. So I just started taking a few notes about how the results went and what we'd done over the couple of days. And then when I got home, I thought, I wouldn't mind trying to write a book about the story. And again, I didn't know how to write a book, but I thought just start at the beginning. So it's almost like a autobiography, I suppose. I just started with my life and wanting to play for Australia and And then, luckily, as you know, you'd written your book, Fat, 40 and Fired, so I'd got in contact with you and asked you for a bit of advice, and you told me I needed to get an agent. So I ended up getting an agent, got rejected half a dozen or a dozen times, finally found one, and she took it to HarperCollins, and they loved it. So they published full Contact Sudoko, and again, it was just a very nice, I guess it's a nice thing for me to have as a record of my life up until that time, because I went into a bit of detail. So it's, I guess some people write diaries. I wrote a book.
I've seen you give that story as a speech on stage, and I've seen you get a standing ovation with people cheering and clapping, and it is such a funny, endearing and inspiring story, mate. So I can't wait to see it on the screen.
But I think the reason the people like it is because I'm no good and there is no Cinderella story, and a lot of speakers speak because they're authorities on a subject. The only reason I speak is because I can't play Sudoku. So I think it's a very relatable story, because there was no ability required whatsoever in what we did. It was just about having a positive attitude and thinking, this seems like fun, let's go and do that. And I just think people can really relate to it, because the majority of people, your kid's not going to go play for the Wallabies, or your kid's not going to open the batting for Australia. And I tell the story about my mum, sitting for 3 hours to watch me play cricket for 12 seconds because I got out first ball. So a lot of people can relate, because, as I said, there is no Cinderella story. We didn't win. We did come last, but we had to go, and for some reason even though we failed, we found some level of success in our failure that, a lot of people can relate to. So I just get a real kick out of meeting people and telling my story.
I love it. I think underachievement has got a bad press, mate. There should be more of it. It's been so lovely chatting to you on 5 Minutes. Thank you for getting over your worries about not being worthy enough for the format. I think you've been a delightful guest. I have to move on to my sixth and final question, which is, who would you like to hear on 5 of My Life next, and why?
So water polo has been a big part of my life, simply because of my wife. I never played it when I was in Sydney, but coming across here, and Sharon was in the Australian team for 9 years. She ended up playing 1,000 games of A grade or above. She played A grade for 34 years. So water polo is this, and she forced my kids into playing it. One's still playing now. He's been brainwashed. So water polo is this a massive part of my life now. And there's a fella by the name of Tom Hode. And Tom Hode, he'd be 80 years old now. He went to 4 Olympics as a player and 4 Olympics as a coach. He coached my boys through school, and even now, I think he's still coaching 4 teams as an 80-year-old. 2 years ago, him and my wife took my younger son Ben and a group of 13, 17-year-old, 18-year-old boys across to France, Slovakia and Russia on a tour. And this bloke is still the most passionate man about the game of water polo. I think he's just been inducted into the Australian Sporting Hall of Fame with Dennis Lilly, Jana Pittman, Ian Thorpe, that got announced just the other week. So Tom Hode has been elevated to that legendary status. But to sit with him, to see him on the edge of the pool, still coaching now, and I said still coaching four teams as an 80-year-old, and the passion that he still has for that game he's extraordinary. And he's a highly intelligent man. He used to teach languages at Hale School over here, so he's travelled the world, and mate, he's a fascinating man. So for me, a fascinating man with an amazing story to tell, and I think because he's not only with his sport but he's highly intelligent, he would be a great guest for you.
Oh, Mick Colliss, thank you so much for sharing your 5 on 5 of My Life.
My absolute pleasure, and I hope I don't just sit on the cutting room floor.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you follow 5 of My Life, you might enjoy my latest book, Smart, Stupid and 60. In it, I write about a number of the issues discussed on the show. It's the 20-year follow-on from my first book, Fat, 40 and Fired. If you have any feedback on the book or suggestions for the show, please get in touch via my website, nigelmarsh.com.